presentation will be on workplace policies, practices, and women's career progression. But this is from the perspectives of health managers in Kenya. It was a qualitative study. The outline will be as follows. We'll have the background, methods, results, and recommendations. So again, what was the need for us to conduct this qualitative study? Evidence suggests that organization-level policies are important in enabling gender equality and equity in the workplace. As I indicated in the morning, we have talked about how organization policies also support women to progress in their careers. So we found that there was limited research exploring the knowledge of health sector employees on whether policies and practices to advance women's career progression exist in their organizations. So why is this important? When you understand what workplace policies contribute to women's career advancement, through the perspective of these managers, then we can enable institutions as well as the governments to develop and implement appropriate policies addressing discrimination and inequalities in the workplace. So what did we do? We conducted a qualitative study to explore the knowledge. Also, I would refer it to as awareness and perspectives of health managers on, one, which of the organization workplace policies and practices contribute to career advancement of women. Then two, knowledge of how such policies and practices are implemented and monitored. We talked to 8 institutions. We talked to 8 institutions which were purposively selected to be representative of different subsectors of the health sector, including service delivery organizations, research institutes, professional bodies in Kenya within the public and private sector. So we conducted interviews with participants who are willing, available, and consented to be interviewed. I know there was a question yesterday when some had already referred to the publication that we shared, saying that we interviewed less public sector institutions, but we'd want to let you know that we reached out to same or equal number of participants, but only those who are willing, available, and consented to be interviewed were interviewed. So we did reach out to both public sector and private sector. So we conducted 21 interviews, 7 key informant interviews, and 14 in-depth interviews with male and female senior level managers in the 2 sectors. By 2 sectors, I mean the public and the private sector. So at least 2 participants were selected for either in-depth interviews or key informant interviews. When we talk about IDIs or middle-level managers, we are referring to head of department, program, or unit. Then when we refer to senior level managers for this particular study, we are referring to organizational heads, administrators, and human resource managers. So it was important for us to get perspective from the senior level managers as well as mid-level managers, so that we see if there's differences or there's in terms of whether they know whether there's policy within the institutions to support the women to progress in their careers. So that is the profile of the participants. We had males were 8. So for the key informant interviews, there were 6. And then for in-depth interviews, there were 2. Female, for key informant interviews, there were 1. And then for IDIs, there were 12. So we can conclusively say that the majority of the participants in the informant interviews were male. And as I've indicated before, the key informant interviews were senior managers. So it already indicates is happening. Then while the majority of the participants in the IDIs were female, also indicating that females were mainly mid-level managers, not senior level managers. Then in terms of education qualification, we only focused on the, we only sought that information from mid-level managers, and the highest qualification was a master's degree as indicated. And then as I'd indicated also earlier, that the majority of the study participants worked in the private sector. Okay, so I'll start the presentation by talking about the awareness, the results, that is, the awareness of workplace policies and practices. So we found out that majority of the senior managers, when I use SM, I am referring to senior managers. So majority of the senior managers in both sectors mentioned that they were aware, mentioned that they were aware of the workplace policies and practices promoting women's career advancement. However, only a few of the mid-level managers in the two sectors reported that they were aware of these policies. I hope you already see what is happening there. So senior managers are aware of the policies that can enable them to, that can enable women to grow. However, the mid-level managers who are also looking at progressing do not have the knowledge that there are those policies that can support them to progress in their careers. And in terms of the reason for this, the middle managers in the public sector mentioned that there's limited exposure and dissemination of the policies to them. Actually, they were saying that the policies are handled at the county or national level. So according to them, they rarely get to read these policies, and that is the reason why they're not aware of certain policies. However, if you look at the private sector, the reason was quite different. That although they might be having these policies within the institution, they have not had time to read them, which was also quite interesting, because maybe you think that you have the policies, you give them to your staff, but they don't end up reading the policies. So that one also shows the need for the organization to be able to disseminate this information. It's not enough for you to just inform your employee that these are the policies that can support you. You also have to go ahead and inform that this is the policy and this is what you need to do in order for you to be able to benefit from the policies that are in place to encourage women to progress in their careers. So that is an excerpt from one of the idea from a female participant. Now, in terms of our second objective, which was looking at health sector, workplace policies and practices, promoting women's career advancement, the health managers, HM in this sense is the health managers, mentioned that policies and practices to advance gender equality, diversity and inclusion were those related to promotion, equal pay, sexual harassment, parental leave, reproductive rights, and flexible working schedules. And given these are 7 areas, only 2 of them were thought by the health managers to advance women's career advancement. So only promotion and flexible work schedule. These other ones, they noted that they contribute to women remaining in the workplace or during the hiring process. So for the promotion, I'll present the results in such a way that I talk about the private sector as well as the public sector, so that you can see whether there's a comparison in terms of what they think about these particular policies. So for the private sector, a female manager reported that they are having a female program manager for the first time. For me, this was very profound because she mentioned, if you can look at the excerpt, so let me see. Well, because of non-discriminatory policies, our program manager is a woman for the first time. So it shows the role of policies in enabling women to take up leadership role. Because she went ahead and said that in the past they've never had a female program manager, they've always had men. So already it shows the need for us to have policies within organizations that enable women to progress in their career. And in fact, the story was quite interesting because the respondent said that a female intern, so it began from the internship, that a female intern was able to rise to be a program manager, showing that anything is doable. You can be a program manager even if you're not a program manager today. So an intern can always even rise to a program manager position if the policies are enabling for them to be able to grow. Then in this same private sector, a particular respondent also mentioned that they felt women were only promoted when they're running women-focused programs. By this I mean that, for example, if the target audience are, let's say, is women, that's when women are now given that leadership role. So if it's a program that maybe the beneficiaries are women, then women are given that opportunity, but not if the program does not consider that the participants are not of the same gender with the leader. So that was an issue that they also raised that is also quite important for us to capture, that women are equally able to serve even in projects that the particular study participants participants are not women. Then for the public sector, some health managers noted that gender equity is sometimes considered during promotion, in addition to other qualifications to ensure that there's gender balance, which was also quite interesting. Then flexible work schedules. So for the private sector, a female mid-level manager reported that due to flexible work schedule, a woman was able to pursue their studies, and after completion, they were able to rise into leadership ranks, showing that flexible work schedule is also important because one is able to get time to go and advance their studies. Then she went ahead and also mentioned that a woman who started employed with a certificate was now doing her master's degree due to flexible hours. Now she could leave early, and you see based on the practice that they have within the institution, so as long as you have that admission, you are allowed to leave work as early as 3 p.m. So that one allows you to be able to go to school, which I think that is also something that we can take there. Then for the public sector, there was no mention of flexible hours. So maybe we'll have a discussion whether there's that flexibility in the public sector. But as far as the interviews are concerned, no one mentioned about flexibility in terms of work schedules in the public sector. So it might be there or it might not be there, but it was not mentioned during the interviews. Then, as I'd said, for these other 5 ones, it was not about encouraging women to progress in their careers, but rather retaining them in the workforce or during the hiring process. So when you look at hiring, in the private sector, majority of health managers noted that hiring is based on one's competencies and not gender. Same case to, that is private sector as well as public sector as well, because they also noted that it's only based on competency, that during hiring, we don't look at the gender, so as long as you're good enough, we take you. Then, but the same public sector also mentioned that sometimes they consider the 2/3 gender rule when hiring, and I hope you all know what 2/3 gender rule is all about. So they say that they do that during hiring to ensure that they have gender balance during the hiring process. Then we have equal pay. Under equal pay, almost all the health managers in the 2 sectors also mentioned that pay is determined by competence, education, qualification, and the budget that is available, and gender does not play any role here. But also, one interesting thing about equal pay, which I think it also affects most of us, is that some female middle-level managers reported that they did not know their male colleagues' salary, but thought they were paid the same. No, if you don't know what your colleague is earning, and you assume that you are earning the same, because there's no transparency anyway. So if today your HR tells you, you and your colleague are earning the same pay, you will believe it because it's your HR. But since you don't know their pay, you are not able to confirm or deny. So for this person, she thought that they're paid equally. But maybe we could have consulted her father to ask her, how do you know that? But that was also something quite interesting. Then sexual harassment and parental leave. Caroline touched on that. So in terms of sexual harassment, both sectors mentioned that they have sexual harassment policies, which I think is also important because it guides the interaction between colleagues. Then we have parental leave and maternity leave, and also paternity leave. It was mentioned here in the morning. So for maternity leave, majority of senior managers in both sectors reported to have paid maternity leave. However, the duration varies for the 2 sectors. So for the public sector, they mentioned they have, they provide 90 days as per the government directives, while the private sector is at the employer's discretion. So it was also interesting to learn that there are those who receive only 30 days, which is also something that maybe there's need for streamlining, because I think there's a rationale behind why they issue 90 days. So if it is left at the employer's discretion to determine how many paid leave days you are supposed to get maternity, then it becomes quite a challenge. As far as paternity leave is concerned, only few health managers in both sectors indicated that there's a for paternity leave. also showing that there's a gap here, that paternity leave is not factored in so much in several institutions. And then the duration also varies, with the majority of them saying 7 to 10 days. I'm wondering if 7 is enough for you to be able to take care of your, yes. Then we go to reproductive rights. So for the reproductive rights, the private sector mentioned that the institutions have insurance benefits that cover most of their reproductive health needs, which is also a plus. Then for the public sector, I think this was also a good for me, it's a good recommendation and a way forward. There's an institution that mentioned that they have a room for their female employees to express and store milk for their staff's young children, which I think is also great and is something that can be emulated. Then another participant also said that they have policies that allow flexibility for women who have delivered or breastfeeding to leave work early or have flexi hours. So as you can see, already we can see some of the good practices that are happening that can be adopted, that has also worked, and these female employees are acknowledging that these ones have enabled them to be able to remain in the workforce, because they know they can bring their children, they can breastfeed them at work, they can leave work early, so they can be able to take care of their families as well as remain in the workforce. So now let's focus on the implementation and monitoring of the health sector workplace policies. I've already mentioned the policies. So the health managers in both sectors, how the policies are implemented in general. However, they did not state how this is done for specific policies. By this I mean, they mentioned, for example, how are the policies implemented? They say this and this and that, but they do not specify how is the sexual harassment policy implemented. Now that is the difference. They mention how the policies are implemented in general, but not on the specific policies. So that is also something that needs to be taken into account, because they need to know how each and every policy is implemented, and how each and every policy is monitored for accountability purposes. Then some institutions also measured that the implementation and monitoring of the policy is informal. So there are no proper structures to be able to do this. So this is also a challenge. Then there was a difference in terms of the implementation. So for the private sector, they measured that the implementation and monitoring of the policies is conducted at the institutional level. But for the public sector, the organizations that were interviewed indicated that individuals that were interviewed indicated that the policies are implemented and monitored at the national and county level. So who implements and monitors the policy, irrespective of the implementation, whether it's done at the institutional, county, or national level? Some health managers noted that it's the duty of HR department. Others mentioned it's the role of the management. And one interesting one was that this is done by a gender committee, which comprises of different members focusing on gender mainstreaming. So how does the implementation happen? For the private sector, some of them mentioned that the policies begin to be implemented and monitored during the hiring process, as employees are given policies to append their signatures to hold them accountable. Others in the same sector also mentioned that there's periodic dissemination of the policies as a way of keeping their staff informed about the policies in place, which I also think it's a good one, where you have, often you have discussion with your employees to be able to know what are the policies that are there, how are these policies able to support them. Then some also mention that their HR conducts regular checks to ensure that staff adhere to the policies in place, and any changes that are there, they're also informed so that they know what is evolving as far as these policies are concerned. So for the public sector, it was quite interesting that let's say generally the health managers lacked sufficient knowledge of implementation and monitoring, and this was as a result of course, they mentioned that they're not the custodian of the policies. So most of the time, since it's done at the county or national level, they wouldn't be able to comment much about how the implementation and monitoring is done. So this is also something to highlight as well. For one male mid-level manager, they reported that they also benchmark with other institutions, and the few health managers also reported that failure to adhere to these policies has consequences such as job loss. So my final slide, and as always, this is the only thing that you need to remember in my presentation. So in terms of a recommendation, what are we saying here? We are saying that there's limited awareness of the policies and practices that can advance women's career progression in the organization, especially for mid-level managers. So this is something that needs to be highlighted, that while the senior managers, who most of the time, especially for the private sector, they're the ones who come up with these policies, they know the policies are there, but the people who are supposed to benefit from those policies are not even aware, or if they're aware, they've not had time to interact with them. So there's need for periodic or even continuous information sessions to their staff on the policies and practices that exist. Because if you're targeting for a woman to be able to progress within your institution, and the policies that are supposed to support them, they're not even aware of, then it beats the point. Then the third recommendation is that there is need for organizations to be deliberate in having supportive policies, as well as other pragmatic interventions beyond policies. For example, the breastfeeding room and so on, such as training, mentorship, can enable women to progress in their careers. So we are saying that it's not policies alone. There should be also other interventions alongside the policies, so that women have the policies to back them up, and also have interventions that support them to progress in their careers. Last but not least, there is need for each public sector organization to develop, implement, and monitor their own policies to increase ownership of the policies and to address the distinctive needs of the institutions. Thank you.